Okay, so everyone, thank you for joining us. My name is Andrea Ruth. I'm a member of Sarasota Strong. I'm typically in the area of Sarasota. I live on Anna Maria Island, but I am in Kansas City right now, so I'm coming to you from Missouri. And I want to tell you a little bit about Sarasota Strong in case you don't know us. This might be your first community forum with us. Sarasota Strong is a growing group of Sarasota County neighbors, and we're committed to learning about trauma and responding to its impact. Our mission is to promote community-wide trauma awareness through healing, education, action, and leadership. And our vision is to create a community that cares for itself. So you can become part of this conversation with us by participating in the monthly forums like this one. You can join a working group of Sarasota Strong or register for a workshop or a training event at our website. And I'm going to give that to you, and I expect Annalise will put it in the chat too. There it is, www.srqstrong, all one word, .org. A new thing that we're involved in right now is part of the COVID-19 community-wide team to address hotspots in Manatee and Sarasota County. So if you're interested in that, I think there'll be information on the website. And finally, Antoinette Johnson is on the Zoom today. She and I are co-chairing a new committee that Sarasota Strong is committed to starting related to aging, resilience, and trauma. And we're about to have our first meeting of that committee. So if that's something you're interested in, if you're interested in seniors and some of the isolation issues that people are facing right now, or the impact of trauma on seniors, I'm gonna put my number in the chat, but you can call me on my cell phone and we'll get you hooked up with our committee. That number is 816-678-4341. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers for today. And full disclosure, Kathleen Harnish McKune, who is the oldest of the three sisters, is someone I do consulting work with, usually in Kansas and Missouri, but we're thinking about branching out into Florida. So you're gonna meet one of my dearest friends, somebody who I have a lot of respect for, and probably the most masterful facilitator I've ever met. And so let me tell you about Kathleen. She lives in Olathe, Kansas. Well, it's actually Shawnee now. We need to change that. Shawnee, Kansas, with her husband, David. She has a son, Zach, and a fur baby named Mo, who's the cutest little dog you've ever seen. She enjoys spending time with all the children in her life, including riding roller coasters, something I don't do anymore. And she enjoys having important reflective conversations like the one that you're going to hear today. And then Kathleen co-founded an organization, a company called TeamTech in 1996. Her work is her passion. She's assisting nonprofit and governmental organizations which serve the most vulnerable in our communities. And she's known for, TeamTech is known for moving ideas into action. So that's Kathleen. Let me introduce the sisters. You'll see on your screen Karen Dickson. She lives in Clintonville, Wisconsin in the summer, but in Tucson, Arizona in the winter with her husband Lyle and their dog Rodeo. She loves to spend time at their place in Door County in the summer, and that's where a lot of friends and family gather to be with her there. She works as an IT recruiter, and she's a practicing Reiki master. She enjoys kayaking, traveling, being around horses, which you may hear a little bit more about during the presentation, and watching sunsets. Her dream is to open a multidisciplinary facility to help others heal from past traumas. Now, Sharon, who is also Sharon Borde in the screen up there, lives in Rio, Wisconsin. She enjoys living in the country with her husband, Dennis, her son, Kyle, and their family cat, Marcus. She enjoys spending time with family and friends. I think that's kind of a common thread with these sisters, family and friends, boating, camping, outdoor activities. She's also worked in IT recruitment for over 30 years, and she plans to spend some time in retirement helping children with dyslexia and volunteering at local schools. Sharon also is going to work with the sisters. I think this is on the future project list to do a documentary about incest in hopes of bringing attention to the issues surrounding that and to help others heal and thrive, which, as you know, is what we're here about tonight. So without further ado, I'm just going to turn it over to Kathleen, Karen, and Sharon, and remind you that if you're not speaking, please put your Zoom on mute.
Great. Andrea, thank you so much for that. And thank you for arranging for us to present this evening. Thank you all for taking time out of your evening. As Andrea said, I'm Kathleen. I'm the oldest of the Harnish sisters. In fact, I like to remind them that I'm 18 months, 1 day, 13 hours, and 39 minutes older than my twin sisters. We were born in Denver, Colorado, then moved to Littleton, Colorado for elementary school, and eventually to a small western Kansas community called Kinsley when I was 13 and Sharon and Karen were 11. We were born into what really looked like a normal middle-class family, and we were soon to discover that what we'd been born into was a family with multi-generational incest and abuse on our paternal side. And that would rain down on all three of us children, all three of us girls, both at the hands of our father and our paternal grandfather. Sharon, to you.
I'm Sharon, and we're the youngest of the three Harnish sisters, born identical twins, and I'm the older of the twin by 4 minutes, but Karen kicked me out. That's why.
I kicked her out because I couldn't stand her any longer. How would we know that our experience would be such a blessing to be born together, though? Sharon and I would soon learn that out of the children in the family, we were considered the dummies. We were not wanted. And we would need to survive unmentionable trauma and incest and abuse throughout our entire life in this home.
We wanted to open by just sharing with you a little bit about why we wrote Remarkably Resilient. And now my cursor's not working. There we go. So it started actually in a facilitation. And as Andrea said, I've been facilitating now for about 30 years, and I typically focus on process. I don't get too involved in content, just enough to make sure that the conversation is comprehensive. But it was April of 2017, and Erica Immenshu, a dear friend of mine here in Kansas City, asked if I would facilitate the coming together of Trauma Matters KC, Resilient KC, with Alive and Well STL. And so I was facilitating those conversations, and on that meeting day, Alive and Well STL was sharing a bit about the neuroscience of trauma, the discovery of ACEs, the link between early childhood trauma and chronic disease and mental illness. And I remember just stopping and listening as the speakers were presenting, realizing that all of this science, all of this neuroscience, these great physicians and researchers were speaking very much to the journey that my sisters and I had experienced, but not talked too much about, certainly not in any detail. And so I had just light bulbs of just how relevant it was, but it was also very painful. And I remember when the ACEs score came up, and we have very, very high ACE scores, and it just struck me that perhaps the childhood we had wasn't so normal, and perhaps it was more skewed than we had realized. It also started providing a lot of whys and explanations for what we were experiencing as adults. So I called Karen, I said, we need to start talking about this and learning and reading. And so Marsha Morgan, who some of you know, became a mentor of mine, and she gave me books to read and papers to read, and Karen and I would talk, and we suddenly realized that so many of the chronic diseases that we've been plagued with throughout our life, and some of the struggles with mental illness and some of the struggles with relationships, very much could be tied back to our journey as children. So it was from this front of the room experience that I began to talk to Karen and eventually Sharon. We just hadn't shared as much, and what you'll learn about us three is that we didn't share much until we got into our 50s, really. Karen and I a little bit in our 20s, 30s throughout, but really it's in writing of this book that we begin to share more of our stories. So we wanted to start by sharing with you the why. What was it that drove us to want to write our story? And there were really three mantras that came to our mind that drove why we wrote Remarkably Resilient.
Why we wrote Remarkably Resilient, Community Matters.
Was to shed light on incest and abuse.
Out of the darkness and into the light.
To give a voice to those who have experienced or were experienced incest and abuse.
To be silent no more.
And to lend insight to the topic of resilience and the important role that community plays.
Remarkably Resilient, Community Matters. From hurting to healing to helping.
We designed our cover to reflect the traditional Japanese art of kintsugi, which is really about taking fragments from broken objects and melding them together and then creating something new from them. And that rang true for all three of us. So, you know, really just broken, still beautiful, and pieces now whole. We really can't talk about our present life without acknowledging the past. We all grew up, as you'd heard, in a home filled with physical, emotional, and sexual abuse from very early on. Kathleen, with her being 18 months older and Sharon and I, she was in all respects the one that we really looked up to. She was our mother figure. She lived in a world where perfection was really expected from her. And Sharon and I were just treated as throwaways. We were, again, the dummies. We all witnessed physical abuse of our mother at the hands of our father, and then physical abuse of our grandmother at the hands of our grandfather. We felt overwhelming bursts of fear, and we all experienced what our mentally ill and alcoholic father would rain down on the family at just any given time. We were also ranked and rated by our father, and now realize this was the perfect setup to separate us all emotionally from one another and to actually pit us against one another in a sort of competition. Sharon and I endured frequent violent sexual attacks by our father and from our grandfather in later years. And our father's sexual abuse of Kathleen became it was in the form of, "You're more like a wife to me than my own wife is." So hers was more in a loving context, if you want to call it that. I experienced two very, very violent attacks from my paternal grandfather and a rape in my early teens by that same grandfather that really, really devastated me. People who know us would never guess that any of this would have occurred under one household, or that, you know, it was happening at all, because we all hid it very well from everyone. We were straight A students, we were successful, we were good workers, we appeared to be very successful and normal. We each found our own way of coping with the horrors within those walls, and although we were raised together, we experienced our own separate hell. We now know that it's common for incest victims to be separated like this and to remain silent, but this is how this gets perpetuated. And this is why we decided we must speak out and tell our story.
Yeah, so we never really talked to each other about it, not to each other, not to anyone. And people always ask us why. It's common for victims to be isolated. We were ranked and rated at the Sunday dinner table, to be competitors as much as we were siblings. We were silenced through they made us feel like we were either threatened or the violence was just too much. So that's really why we never shared.
So before we kind of close this section of then, we thought we'd just complete that picture a bit with a story of each one of us and our resilience. And then we want to talk about a bit about now, but really most important about the how and the insights that neuroscience, the neuroscience of trauma really gave us about how we were able to break the cycle of incest and abuse in our family. So to me, I was lucky, born a very determined little girl. I was from the day I came out. And I was profoundly shaped by what we call our turning moment of resilience, a term that I learned from a dear friend of mine, Mark, that has worked his entire career helping children recover from abuse and neglect. Mark talked about this as a full color motion picture memory that you can remember when you decided to stand and persevere despite the abuse and neglect you were experiencing. And mine was at age 5. I had just finished what was a regular screaming match with my father. I was always proud because I could stand nose to nose and toes to toes with him and yell right back. And he'd screamed every profound word you could call a little girl at me, and I would scream back, "No, I'm not, Daddy." And that day was like any other, standing in the foyer of our Littleton, Colorado home, my little fists clenched, tears streaming down my face, and I just finished screaming, "No, I'm not, Daddy," when literally, I can still hear it, a voice from very deep within me spoke. And I had not ever heard it before, but it was very clear. I can remember it like yesterday. And it said to me, "You will be different. You are to make a difference." And though I was only 5, almost 6, I knew exactly what that voice was saying to me. It's saying to me, you will never treat a child the way that you're being treated. And second, you have purpose in your life. You are to make a difference. And so with that kind of on my shoulders, I literally moved through life, head down, eyes forward, driven to make a difference. My memory eraser was my coping mechanism. I have very, very few memories from my childhood. I do feel lucky that my sexual advances came when I was a little older in a loving context. I'm not sure I could have handled the violence that Sharon and Karen did, but I did live in my own world. People now tell me in reflection, I was almost unapproachable, kind of the ice queen in high school. But they also said, she's going to conquer the world. You better get out of her way, because I was head down, eyes forward, really driven to make a difference.
For me, I had a couple moments of resilience. One, when I was smaller, I was afraid of the dark in the hallway because bad things happened in the dark to me when I was really little. And I remember one night the family was watching a movie and I was afraid to go down the hall to use the restroom. And so I sat down and I peed on the carpet. And my dad rubbed my nose in it and told me I was like a dog. And my mom didn't come to my defense. And it just really made me really angry. And I thought to myself, you know, I am just gonna outsmart this person, and I'm gonna outwit them now from now on. And I'm just gonna be a Taz, and I'm just gonna be bold and brave and do whatever I want to do. So I peed on the carpet again and made that decision. And then the second time was after our grandfather had attacked us and tried to rape us, and the first time. And I just decided after then that I was going to go. I was a really good reader because I was dyslexic, and I learned how to speed read. And I was just going to lose myself in horse books, which I loved horses from the very beginning of my life. It was the first word out of my mouth. And I was going to own a horse someday who would save me. And I was going to get lost in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. I read that when I was 11 years old, and I was going to go on crazy adventures, and Gandalf was going to save me, and I was going to ride Shadowfax to heaven, I think. So I just determined at that point in my life, I was going to do whatever I could to be bold and to get myself out of there. and to lose myself in books, whenever I felt lost.
For me, incest started when I was very, very young. I can't remember a time when I wasn't being molested. It was violent, and I internalized those violent attacks and just would go into freeze mode, I remember. But in my mind, I told myself that I was enduring the attacks so that I could save my siblings. And so that's how I justified my non-action. I was always threatened to stay silent. Dad was very violent with me. I was probably the meekest and mildest of the children. And he would burn me. He would leave matches out just to tell me to be quiet. And I knew I would be burned if I screamed. But I learned to leave my body and literally just during the most violent moments and go to this beautiful meadow that it was beautiful, and I never really remembered the pain until I came back to my body. So I became passive and quiet, and I was a very withdrawn child with a lot of medical symptoms that never were explained by the medical doctors that Mom would take me to. I had stomach aches and illnesses, but on the flip side of everything, I actually learned to love just every beautiful moment that I was given. That was the gift that I had, because those moments were very few and far between. From the outside looking in, everyone thought that Sharon was just bold and aggressive and the Taz, and she was just out there. She was fun. She was the life of the party. And from the outside looking in, people saw me as just loving and gentle and quiet. They never saw the torment. We never showed that. So my moment of resilience came when I was between the age of 12 and 13. I have to say that what I learned later in life, that God came to me in a form I could recognize. And I gained my faith and my mission to spread love in this moment. I had adopted a dog that I found in our little hometown that summer, and I named him Boy, and he followed me everywhere, and I took him everywhere with me. We went to the river, we went on all kinds of adventures, and I told him all my troubles. And for me, that was a summer that I had just endured a violent rape from my grandfather, and became pregnant when I was about 12 and a half and had to fund my own abortion. And I just didn't want to live anymore. And I wasn't sure life was worth living. So this dog really helped me in that summer. One Sunday morning, I went upstairs to get a book. My mother was at work and our dad was home, and I came by Kathleen's bedroom and heard familiar sounds that told me she was learning the lessons of how to be with a man. And I snapped. And I remember that I had thought that everything I had endured was something that only I was enduring, and it just drove me to a place that I thought I would never be. And I had decided that I would murder my parents. And so I literally spent the rest of the day figuring out how to do that. And I gathered up the knife that I would use, and I memorized their bedroom so that in the dark I would know what I was doing. And I made my plan, and I had decided that I would kill both them and myself and be done, and everyone would be okay. So that evening, I remember I went in the room and tried to decide which one first. And I had decided that I would kill my father first. So as I raised the knife and got ready to do this, my dog came to my side, and he took my arm, and he took the arm with the knife in it. And he just kind of shocked me back into reality, and he led me down the stairs, and he led me outside and across the road into the area where I always sat with him by the river. And he never let go of my arm. And I remember that I just laid there and I cried like years worth of tears. And I I knew that from that moment on, I would have to endure the kind of things that I was having to endure, but I also felt changed, and I too heard a voice. And the voice said that I needed to make a choice. And I remember I screamed out, well, I choose love. And from that moment on, that's what I did with my life. I chose love. And I chose to stand strong, and I chose to endure. But I knew that when I left that home, that I would spread my love for life and my love for individuals throughout my lifetime. And so that was my moment of resilience, and it's what really helped me survive. So the word believe came to me that night. It's still my favorite word. I just had it tattooed on my arm. And I'm so proud of myself for wearing my word. But I had said to Kathleen, I wish every child that was going to make the wrong choice that I was going to make that night would have had a dog named Boy.
Thank you, Karen. Sharon.
We thought it would be appropriate just to share a little bit about our father. He actually, we learned a lot about him. He was very, very, very intelligent. He could be extremely caring and extremely supportive. Although we definitely feared him, he took us camping in the mountains. He let us be around animals. We had some really actually good times. Unlike, you know, he wasn't always the way he was, but he was beaten. When we learned a little bit more about his background, he was beaten most of the days of his life by our grandfather, and he had so many broken bones in his body. We learned later on when he was x-rayed as an older man that he must have endured horrific things. He was actually forced to incest family members. He had untreated mental illness. He, I'm sure, was probably bipolar. He had episodic alcoholic events, and he would just forget, just to take his mind off things, drink and drink until he would just black out. And he also served in the military, and he had PTSD very severely, and he recounted some events that happened, at least to me, and his military records are still sealed and highly classified. So he had a pretty bad experience then. So we just wanted to share a little bit about, you know, who our father was and how he grew up with what he did.
And so it wasn't until our late 20s that we even began to share a little bit, not any details. In fact, as I said earlier, no details till we started writing the book. So this was an incredible healing and helping journey, but also at times very difficult. But we wanted to share a little bit of humor about what our writing summer of 2019 looked like. So it was something like this.
We ate our feelings.
All the time, all summer.
We kind of looked like this cat did all summer.
Completely frazzled.
But we did learn that we three sisters became a lot closer because of this and writing the book together.
Yeah. Love you, sisters.
Love you, sister.
You have a picture of us now as we then transition into a little bit of how in our first exercise or breakout group. As Andrea said, Karen's a successful IT recruiter. Sharon and Karen are identical twins. So Sharon and the same profession really helped Karen get in there, though she's now retired and we're a little jealous. And I do facilitation work. But even though we've been successful, we would all three say that our proudest moment is that we broke the multi-generational cycle of abuse in our family. Our children were raised in safe, loving environments. We do, though, just like neuroscience says, we want you to know we have long-term chronic medical conditions as a result of the trauma and abuse we incurred. And both Sharon and Karen have diseases that will shorten their lives, and they live in a lot of physical pain. We are still in recovery. That's a journey. It's not a destination, as many of you know. And we have triggers that still occur, but we feel more equipped to manage them today than we did before our recovery journeys began. But really our $64,000 question that we've carried for years, and it was the neuroscience of trauma and resilience, the work in the ACEs study and the profound work after that really helped us understand how we broke the cycle and began to then form the frame of our writing. As we already shared, the turning points of resilience, each one of us had one. It was profound and impactful. The 4 R's, relationships, neuroscience says you only need one caring, secure, loving adult relationship to help you get through. We each had one in our small town of Kinsley, and we are grateful for that individual. Response, we each had our own coping mechanisms. We'll talk about that a little bit, and certainly our journeys of recovery through help in the community to have those places, spaces, and graces for recovery. And then regulation. Neuroscience tells us how important it is to understand that dysregulation that comes with that constant dumping of cortisol into the body, and not knowing even about regulation or dysregulation until we were just really literally a few years ago. One thing we wish that we had learned sooner. We also added in reflection balanced with action, so a chance to reflect a little bit together, but just reminding those in our community that community matters. And Sharon and Karen and I wouldn't be here and be the women that we are today if it hadn't been for some key community members. We can say that with no uncertainty. So we want to pause just a little bit on turning points. I'll let Sharon set this up, and then we'd like to move to a breakout group and give you a chance to talk a little bit. So Sharon, over to you.
So we thought that, it was important to really talk about why turning points matter, because they do bring a lot of insight. They bring and provide hope and purpose. They deliver a whole new worldview to people. And they're all important seeds of resilience. So we thought in our breakout session, we would talk about, turning points of resilience.
So we thought, and I know Annalise is going to put some of this in the chat, that maybe we'd move for about 10 minutes into breakout groups. We love that feature on Zoom. And we undoubtedly believe that each of you have had some kind of turning point. It doesn't have to be tied to trauma. We all know that we have turning points, those moments that perhaps the birth of a child, or you got a degree, or maybe you had a chance to travel to a different part of the world, and you, as a result of that, came back changed or different, or learned something, or had a different perspective. Or perhaps it was just an aha moment where you were kind of standing amongst a group of people and something happened. Could have been positive, could have been tragic, and you were changed as a result of that. So we want you just to take a moment in your small groups and visualize that turning point moment. And I'm sure you've had many of those as you think back on your journey through your life. And then in your small groups, we're not asking you to necessarily recount that whole moment. We wish we had more time, but give a snippet of what that turning point moment was. And then we'd like for you to share a bit about what you learned and perhaps how you were different because of that turning point moment in your life. So how it shifted you. So we'll go into breakout groups for 10 minutes. Annalise will orchestrate that. You'll just have to hit the join button. And then when you're ready to leave, you'll either get a notice that the rooms are closing, or if you do finish early, feel free to just leave the breakout group. Don't leave the meeting. You'll be given 2 options, leave the meeting or leave the breakout group. And then we'll come back and share a little bit and then move on with the presentation. So Annalise, over to you to move us into breakout groups to talk a bit about turning points, what we learned, and the difference they made. Thank you all. We hope we had a great conversation. I hope you did as well, and a chance to share a little bit among your colleagues. We're going to move fairly quickly just through the rest of this, so we have some time at the end. And Annalise, we'll have to do the next breakout a little shorter, probably, maybe okay. about 8 minutes.
Okay.
We want to talk a little bit about the next R, the R of relationships, and I think this goes over to Karen. Karen, are you there? And off mute. Karen, you're on mute.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the key findings of the incredible work that the researchers on the neuroscience of trauma and resilience know that it only takes just one safe, consistent, loving adult relationship to help a child build that resilience. In the face of all the adverse childhood experiences that they may have. Strong, secure, loving relationships were really the key to our success with each and every one of us. And these relationships provided us with refuge, which was a safe place away from home. We had employment with incredible employers that provided us with the economic independence that we needed in order to leave home and in order for Sharon and I to actually feed ourselves. We had incredible schools and teachers that gave us encouragement and hope. And we just had individuals that showed us kindness and really unconditional love. They may not have asked if there was anything going on at home, but they recognized that there was just something a little bit off. For me, I was personally connected with a dentist and his wife who moved into our town when I was 13. And they obviously recognized that I needed to be employed and that something was wrong at home. And this dentist actually taught me how to be a dental assistant, which, you know, who becomes a dental assistant when they're in high school, clear back then. But he paid me well, more than I would ever earn anywhere else. And he showed me kindness and gave me confidence in the role that I had. And then I also got involved with their family. So I actually learned what, you know, quote, a normal family looked like. So that was my saving grace.
And we're guessing that each one of you had somebody in your life. And just quickly, mine was Bill. In fact, he was probably in, really, because on all three of those girls' lives. And Bill was the local entrepreneur at Kinsley. He had the gas station, the ice machine, the laundromat, the car wash, and I worked at all of those throughout high school. In fact, all three of us girls worked multiple jobs. So we could be either at school activity, or working to be away from home. And as Karen said, the economic piece, each one of our key relationship also provided us with a job. For me though, Bill also provided me with a role model of what a safe adult male relationship could look like. He didn't ask for anything from me except for just a good work ethic. And he taught me things that you normally think a father would teach a daughter. So how to change oil, change a tire, I could pump gas, but he also taught me that I was worthy and that perfection wasn't necessary. And so I stayed in contact with Bill. He lived in Kansas, and so do I. I would see him at least annually. And Bill passed away last year. And I was so grateful that a few years ago, I had taken the time and effort to let him know the difference that he had made in my life and the lives of Sharon and Karen. And as would not surprise you, Bill already knew the difference that he had made. So that's Bill. Sharon, over to you for Sarah. I think you're on mute, Sharon. Yeah, you're muted, Sharon. Can you get off mute?
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was so fortunate to have Sarah in my life. She nicknamed me Sunny, and she worked at the grocery store with her father, Gus. So I got to see their loving relationship. And Sarah just knew that we needed help, and she let me work in the meat market. She said I was very sunny, very outgoing, always smiling, but I had a weird sense of aggression. And so she let me work in the meat market, and she told me I would just take that cleaver and just beat the crap out of the meat. And she let me, and she knew we needed help when she said the first paycheck she gave me, I turned around and I cashed it and I bought groceries with it. And so she would tell me that I messed up grocery orders or meat orders or whatever, and I would have to go home with those. So actually Karen and I were fed very well that way. And I got to work for Sarah until my father kind of got, I think, jealous or maybe thought Sarah and I were getting too close, and then I ended up having to quit her and work for Bill. But I was so fortunate to stop by this year and back up with her. She's still in Kinsley, and we've become so close. And I asked her if she knew, that there was something like that going on. She said, Sharon, I suspected, but she said, all I could do was help you and do the best I could as a community person and make sure that you were trying to thrive and that you could pay your way to get to college and get your way out of here. So I love her to this day, and I always will.
At different points in time, for all of us, Dad forced us to give up those relationships, and it was always about at the time that I think he thought these folks were getting too close to the truth. So that was difficult for us, but we managed to make new relationships. But the point is, again, community matters. The relationships that all of the community members we had in our lives along the way saved each and every one of us girls. So it only takes just one person to care.
So that leads us into our second and last reflection before our close and some questions. And that is, perhaps if you would vision with us. We often just envision what would it look like if that neuroscience that says it only takes one. That's what I was kind of blown away. Only one caring, consistent, secure, loving adult relationship to make the difference in the life of a child, especially a child who is at risk. And we certainly experienced that. So perhaps for 7 to 8 minutes in your small group, you could just take a little moment and say, what difference would it make if every at-risk child in our community had that one relationship? And or what might be the one campaign look like? What would that maybe look like? And how would people be engaged? And how could that difference be made with that kind of an effort? So we'll move back into our small groups and just have a little, if you wouldn't mind visioning with us about what that might look like in a community and the difference that that might make. So Annalise, over to you.
Everybody should be coming back.
Yep.
We made it.
We made it back.
All right. So we'll
We
make
had some
sure
great
Sharon and
ones.
Karen, you're both unmuted. Oh, anyway. Wow. Just lots of reflections
Yeah.
on insights and ideas and peer-to-peer and your people that made the one, and just even noticing. I love the comment just about notice the ones in your life. They're there, and sometimes we miss them. So I'll quick jump up. We'll just do a little bit more to close, and then would love to take questions that you have. So I'm going to move off this slide. Hold on just a minute. And over to the R of recovery. So Sharon, this is over to you.
So we've all learned and we know recovery is not a destination, it's a journey. And it really does look different from person to person. It's enhanced through identifying your emotions, the things that trigger you, and then learning about regulation. But why is it so hard? I think because we had the belief that everyone has something in their childhood that happened, so just get over it. There's also a perspective that, oh, it wasn't that bad, it could have just been a lot worse. And there's an embarrassment and shame aspect to it too. I feel defective. I don't want anyone to know that this is happening in my life. And then it didn't affect me. I'm fine. Look at me. I'm doing well in my life. So there's all sorts of reasons. And then pride. I've always been able to handle this as a child. I can handle, this as an adult. And then the guilt. I should have done this. I could have done this. So we all have different reasons why we don't, seek our recovery.
I want to give you just a brief glimpse into our unique recoveries. Journeys different for each one of the sisters. And so Karen, a little bit about your recovery journey.
Well, I think that more than anything, my recovery was led just through a desire to understand multi-generational abuse and how it occurs. And that being in nursing school helped me take a lot of psychology classes, and I started to really delve into personality characteristics and mental illness. And so that was important to me. And then the other thing that happened to me is I found a wonderful therapist when I was in my early 20s. And to this day, I think of her, and she helped journey me in so many ways through all the difficult memories and the things that I needed to confront. So I was very grateful for that. And then, although I'm in constant pain from a lot of the things that happened and some surgeries that I've had, I just have this unbelievable ability to love and share moments of joy and look for moments of joy. And that's, you know, I think very much all because of my turning point with my dog named Boy.
For me, I always thought it would be someday that I'll just feel better. But I actually shared in my breakout session with a couple of you about my journey to faith. And it was through the birth of my premature son, and they told me he was going to die. And I actually, for the very first time, hit my knees and prayed. And I lost the sight in my eyes. I got sight back only in one eye. And I told myself that I see more with one eye than I ever did with two. And I found faith, and faith is huge for me. I also, got to own horses and raise horses and Morgan horses, and they're the love of my life too. And I still volunteer for all the neighbors' horses, and I'll take care of any horse that you'll let me. And then I've taken art classes, and I discovered that I'm pretty artistic and I love oil painting. And then I also have recently, my physician has helped me. She actually read my book. And she said, a lot about you, I understand now. And she had a high A score. But she said she knows I have anxiety issues. And so through a little bit of medical help, I've gotten to deal with my anxiety a little bit better. And I never thought that I would, you know, open up that way. But it's been extremely helpful in my recovery.
Thank you, Sharon. And in our breakout group, someone already said this. And so the insight for me when I finally did journey into recovery in my 40s, I kind of dipped my toe in my 20s and decided I was a successful businesswoman, and I ran from that as fast as I could. It was too painful. Is that you heal from the inside out. I really recognized I had a hole in my soul in my therapy in my 40s, and I've been trying to fill it up from the outside in. There's some not particularly good decisions, and I often call looking for unconditional love in all the wrong places. And so it was when I realized that it was an inside out journey that hole could be filled in my soul. And is it ever completely filled? No. You know, you still feel some loss there, but for the most part, understanding that, and again, in our small groups was shared, others have experienced that inside out kind of journey of recovery. Sharon kind of mentioned, we wanted just to highlight as we close a few of the ways, and almost this links directly to regulation. None of us knew that how dysregulated we've lived our lives. And now understand it more. And so part of that recovery has been to find the self-soothing, calming activities. So Karen, for you.
For me, I've learned to practice speaking my truth more than anything else. I've become the queen of direct, and I just say what's on my mind, and that's helped me tremendously. The other thing is I've learned to surround myself with people that know my journey and are providing me with support that I need to continue to heal. And then I also became a Reiki master, and I meditate, and I found that I'm very good as a Reiki master in helping others and moving energies around. I always knew that I had that ability, but it's when I first learned it and I kept taking classes, I knew I was born to do that work. So that's what's helped me so much.
Sharon?
For me, I've learned to paint. I did a program for our second graders here years ago called Art Smart, and I was known as Art Smart Sharon, and I've rediscovered Art Smart Sharon. In fact, Karen and I did this twin tornado picture from Kansas. And it's crazy how we would pick tornadoes to do together, but I was teaching her to paint. And I did Reiki color art and the sea picture. So I'm enjoying that. I'm enjoying taking care of neighbors' horses and just gonna start really volunteering again in the community and helping kids with dyslexia and other things. But I just learned that my adrenal gland is worn out from all the flight and all of the Tasmania life that I lived. So I'm getting help for that. I have multiple sclerosis. I'm sure that's kind of attributed to everything I've been through, but I'm just carrying on and learning to take care of myself a little bit better and do the things that bring me happiness.
And I discovered yoga and meditation on my journey of trying to figure out why I was so hot-headed in personal situations at times. I've also learned, particularly with my teenage son, I used to kind of take him on head on. And I've talked to him a lot about regulation and dysregulation. And so now when we start that, we just look at each other and say, we're dysregulated. And we go to our respective corners or places, and sometimes can't revisit that topic for 24 hours until we're more regulated. So one of our hopes is that more and more people learn about regulation and how to recognize it and how to self-soothe. And so we just close this part, Bar of Recovery, again, reminding that community matters and asking everyone to think about where are those places, those spaces and graces. So places for recovery and treatment, spaces where you can just feel healing and regulating, and those graces, that understanding, that literal grace for people that are going through recovery, because we in our lives have felt all three are important and all three matter. So in closing, we kind of have this as we think about becoming a remarkably resilient community. You recognize and reflect on turning points of all kinds, that reflective capacity, teach regulation to everyone and do it young. Think about what would it mean to have a be the one moment, or what would it mean to at least let people know how important the one is. Choose to respond in whatever way you can. As we said, people didn't ask us, but people stepped into action, made all the difference. And then providing for recovery places, spaces, and graces for healing. Our call to action is thank you for helping us bring the word incest out of the closet, because it is the darkness, the dark that allows it to persist. And we have taken heat from family members for sharing our story, for shaming the family. And we said to them, nobody asked us because they want to know why we didn't ask them if we published. We said, because nobody asked us if they could violate us. So we've taken some pain from it, but we stand in our truth. Partner with us to continue to improve and change mental health treatment for those that experience childhood abuse, neglect, and incest. And then Sharon and Karen have this beautiful vision of the Livingston Center. And maybe we can kind of pull that story together pretty quickly so we have time for questions, if that's okay, Karen and Sharon.
Go ahead, Karen.
I just think all along I've thought about this special place that I think has the spaces, graces, and it's the place for people like ourselves to heal and talk about our journey, and also incorporate some things that people don't normally incorporate, like Reiki, like meditation, like somatic therapy, and maybe bring some horses in, and just have it be a specific center that would really help individuals learn regulation, learn what dysregulated looked like, and learn some of the things that it took us so many years to discover ourselves. So that's my hope, that someday we will have several of those centers, and it will be considered, you know, quite normal for someone to be able to seek out that kind of help.
So just thank you. We put our contact information up if there's anything that we can follow up with you on. And Annalise, we have time, and Andrea, for some questions. We wanted to leave about 10 minutes. If there are questions that people have, we'd be happy to. I'm going to come off of screen share here.
Yeah, so guys, you can go ahead and unmute. If anyone has any questions, or comments, just go ahead and call them out.
I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead, Henry.
And I'm not sure with the three sisters how to direct it, but just open door. I just wonder how you found the process of going from the background that you described and through the processes you used when it came to developing a relationship which led to partnership or marriage and children. How do you find, in your case, let's say, a man, what kind of shopping list or courage list do you use for seeking out that kind of companionship and partnership?
I'll go first. This is Karen. For me, I was lucky enough, I would say, that in my early teens, my first experience with my first boyfriend was that of somebody that was gentle and kind and not demanding of me. And although he and I never spoke about my abuse, he said he would always have a hard time dropping me off home because he knew something was quite off. So I think had I had an individual that was violent with me or demanding or anything else, I might have made different choices in my life because it was something that I was, quote, used to. So I was very lucky that I had that experience, and it taught me that I was to be honored, and that I was not going to be hurt by every man. And so moving forward, that's what I had in my mind. It was him. And it was, and that's what I went after, was a person that was kind and gentle and loving and treated me with respect. And it really turned my life around tremendously. I thank him to this day. In fact, I know him again now. And but in my first marriage, you know, I had that person, but the marriage did not work out. And in the end, I think that having shared a lot of my story was a lot to do with the demise of that relationship. It was hard for him to handle. In my current marriage, again, I went after that person that I had the very first time. And so I've had very loving, successful relationships with men. And I'm very fortunate and very, very glad that that's happened for me. If that
Thank
helps.
you. It brings to mind the need to train the boys as well as the women.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
I think for me, my first husband was abused himself, so I kind of sought somebody who was in my same situation. And that marriage didn't last, although I had my son from that. But we loved each other a lot, but we were both tormented. And but you said a list. In my current marriage, I wrote a list, and his sister found me. I was reading the list at a work site, and she said, that's my brother, you should date him. And it said things like, he must have a very strong family connection, and he must be the oldest son of a farm family, and he has to be kind to the elderly, and he kind of animal. I mean, I had this huge long list, and and he came out, and it turned out to be that list. And I knew I was safe when the very first time we were going to be intimate or something, and I had explained a few things that happened to me. He just sat there and got tears in his eyes, and he looked at me and he said, "You will always be safe with me, and I will love you no matter what, and I'm so sorry that that happened to you." And so I found a gem through my list, and he's wonderful.
Good for you.
It's amazing, Sharon.
I was very steeled up. Remember, head down, eyes forward, you're to make a difference. Very, very untouchable. So very hard for me to have relationships. And people got close, I went the other way. And it took me, I didn't get married till I was 35, and that marriage was not right. When I did tell him, he told me he wouldn't have married me had he known. And so that was the day I left him, you know, emotionally, but not physically. It took a few more years, and the adoption of our son occurred kind of before that. And so I too, once that divorce happened, I really decided that I wasn't ever going to get married again. I steeled up, and then a friend introduced me to my wonderful husband, who also had a difficult childhood. And when I told him, probably our second date, because I said, if you're going to throw me away, you need to do it now, like my first husband did. And he did the same thing that Sharon's husband did. He just embraced me, held me, and just felt for me. And he's been supportive and just beautiful since. So you're already feeling broken and wounded and a bit damaged. And so the last thing you need is the person that you are most vulnerable with to treat you that way. So that's what I would say to the men in those women's lives.
Thank you.
What a beautiful question. Thank you, Henry.
Yeah.
Anything else?
We might have time for one more question, Kathleen.
I just want to jump in and say thank you so much for your bravery. It's just amazing. So just thank you so much to all three of you. It's really something.
You're welcome.
Very
I
well.
just want to say thank you as well. That was a wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Sure.
Me too. Thank you so much for your courage.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It helps.
Well, let's, as we wind down, I want to let you know about a couple of upcoming events. And Kathleen and Sharon and Karen, oh my gosh, thank you guys. I love you. I'm so moved, and I think we all are. And you're right, we need to talk more about what has happened to us so that we can take the shame out of the conversation, you know? So we have a couple of upcoming events we want to make sure you know about. One is an ongoing thing called Raising Anti-Racist Children. And it's a 3 one-hour Zoom sessions course. So it's free. We have some excellent facilitators of that course. And it's really about how to talk with your children about racism and privilege and help develop our children as people who value racial equity and justice. And if you go to our website again, www.srqstrong.org, you can get more information about that. And then on September 28th, our community forum, like we had tonight, we're doing these monthly. The community forum will be from 6:30 to 7:30. And it's called Put Your Mask On First. And I think some of our presenters, Amy Weinberger, I see you. Some of our presenters are here with us tonight for that one. And it's really going to be a community discussion for healing our educators. We're going to focus on addressing compassion fatigue for our school personnel and our teachers. And you know, we just invite you to register for that event. Annalise posted on the website. I think it's already there. She sends out periodic notices so you can register on Eventbrite, and we'd love to have you participate. So, Andy, Blanche, anything? Annalise, anything we forgot?
I just want to add a note onto the Raising Anti-Racist Children workshop. We have filled all the spots for the next workshop that's coming up in October, but we highly encourage, if you or anyone that you know is interested in this, to still go to the Eventbrite link and sign up on the wait list, because we actually have, we're pulling together more facilitators to do another workshop and offer it to more people in the community.
And that's for younger kids, right? Like not for teens, right?
Well, it's for for kids 7 to 12. I think we have someone with like a 14-year-old, but yeah, generally the younger kids.
Okay. If you guys do it one for like people with teens, cool.
Okay, we'll let you know. That could, I mean, we did have a lot of interest when we put out the first one for a workshop for educators. So there's definitely, you know, going to be some molding going on to develop future workshops.
And so Annalise, I just want to jump in because I noticed in the chat, somebody just asked how they could get a hold of the book that the three sisters wrote. So somebody want to tell the audience how they can get a copy of your book.
Sure, it's out on Amazon. You just go on Amazon and type in Remarkably Resilient and it will pop up magically. Thank you for asking.
Okay, well, we just want to thank everyone for being here, for participating in the discussions. Thank you, Annalise, so much for doing the logistics and running the Zoom thing, which I find tricky. and Kathleen and Sharon and Karen, just thank you ever so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.